America is a very special country. It is a place where people from all over the world come to live, dream, and work together. It is a land of big mountains, wide rivers, and shining cities. America is known for being a place where everyone can have a chance to be happy and free. Many brave and kind leaders called presidents have helped America grow and become strong. Now, let's take a journey to learn about these presidents and the stories they made for this great country. The first person we will tell the story of is the first and one of the greatest presidents in American history, Mr. George Washington. George Washington was born on February 22, 1732, in a place called Westmoreland County, in the state of Virginia. He was born on a farm where there were lots of fields and trees. His father's name was Augustine Washington, and his mother's name was Mary Ball Washington. His father was a farmer who also worked with land and mines. His mother stayed home to raise the children and teach them to behave well and work hard. When George was a boy, he went to a small school near his home. Back then, there were no big schools or buses. Children learned reading, writing, and math, and they used slates instead of notebooks. George did not go to college. He finished school when he was still quite young. His father died when George was only 11 years old, so he had to grow up fast and help take care of his family. As a teenager, George learned how to measure land. This job is called a surveyor. He would walk through the forests and fields using tools to measure land so people could buy and sell it. He worked hard and saved money. He also loved riding horses, exploring, and being outdoors. He was very tall and strong, and people noticed that he was a natural leader. When George got older, he became a soldier. He joined the British Army because, at that time, America was still part of Britain. He fought in a war called the French and Indian War, where he showed great bravery. He learned a lot about leading men and making plans during battles. After the war, George went back home and started helping his community. He was chosen to be part of Virginia's local government. That's how he first got into politics, by helping people in his town and state. He didn't like when the British king made unfair rules and taxes for the American people. George believed people should have freedom and should help make the laws they live by. Soon, there was a big problem between the American colonies and Britain. Many people in America wanted to be free from the king. George was chosen to lead the American army in the Revolutionary War. This war was very hard. His soldiers were cold, hungry, and tired. But George didn't give up. He stayed with his men through the worst winters and helped them keep going. One of the bravest things he did was lead his army across a frozen river on Christmas night to surprise the enemy. That battle gave hope to everyone. After many long years, the Americans won the war and they became free. People loved George Washington and wanted him to be their king. But George said no. He didn't want to be a king. He believed America should be a country where people choose their leaders. Later, when the new government was ready, the people chose him to be the first president of the United States. George Washington became president in 1789. He worked very hard to make sure the new country stayed peaceful and strong. He helped make the first rules or laws for the government. These were called the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. He picked smart people to help him, and he listened to different opinions before making decisions. He was fair and honest. He didn't belong to a political party because he thought leaders should work together and not argue just because they were on different teams. After being president for 8 years, George chose to step down. He could have stayed, but he believed that leaders should not hold on to power for too long. That decision showed everyone that America was truly free. George's life wasn't always easy. The hardest times were during the war, when he didn't have enough food, clothes, or help for his soldiers. He also got very sick many times, and sometimes people who were supposed to help him made things worse. But he stayed strong and didn't give up. George got married to a kind and rich widow named Martha Custis. They didn't have children of their own, but they raised Martha's children from her first marriage. George was a caring husband and stepfather. He liked quiet family life at his farm, Mount Vernon. He enjoyed riding horses, walking in the gardens, and reading books. One of his favorite foods was hoe cakes, soft cornmeal pancakes with syrup. George Washington didn't want to be famous. He just wanted to do what was right. but he became one of the most respected people in the world. He didn't get big shiny awards like people do today, but many places were named after him. The capital city of the United States is called Washington, D.C., in his honor. His face is on the $1 bill and the quarter. People build statues of him and study his life in school. Americans like George Washington so much because he was brave, honest, and humble. He helped start the country, and then he stepped away from power. He showed that being a good leader means putting others first and telling the truth, even when it's hard. He taught everyone that freedom is something we must take care of together. George Washington died on December 14, 1799. He was 67 years old. When he passed away, people across the country were very sad. Even people in other countries said kind things about him because they knew he was a special person. George Washington's life teaches us that true greatness comes from doing the right thing, even when it's not easy. He didn't want to be a king or a ruler forever. He wanted to serve, then go home. He loved his country more than power, and that's why the country loved him back. Even today, many years later, when people think of what a good leader looks like, they still think of George Washington, the man who never gave up, who told the truth, and who helped build a home for freedom. Mr. John Adams. He was the second president of United States of America. Once upon a time, in a small town called Braintree in the colony of Massachusetts, a baby boy was born in a cozy little farmhouse. The date was October 30th, 1735, and the baby's name was John Adams. John was born to a loving family. His father, John Adams Sr., was a farmer and a shoemaker. He also served in the local church and town government. His mother, Susanna Boylston, was gentle and thoughtful, always making sure the children were kind, polite, and curious. They were a hardworking family, not rich, but filled with love and strong values. John was the oldest of 3 brothers. As a boy, he loved to play outside, run through the woods, and watch the birds. He didn't always love school at first. He sometimes thought it was boring and would rather fish or fly kites. But his father told him, "Education is your key to the world, John." Those words stuck with him. So little John started trying harder in school. He read books and wrote letters and asked questions. He especially liked reading stories about ancient heroes and great thinkers like Cicero and Plato. When he was just 16 years old, he got into Harvard College in 1751. That was a very big deal back then. At Harvard, John studied hard and made many friends. He learned about law, politics, and how governments worked. He liked to speak his mind and debate ideas. He was short, a little bit round, and had a strong voice. People quickly noticed that John Adams had something very special: the courage to speak the truth. After graduating, he became a teacher for a short time and then studied to become a lawyer. He spent long nights reading huge books and writing notes. Soon, he opened his own law office and started helping people with their problems. He always stood up for justice, even if it wasn't popular. One of the most surprising things John ever did as a lawyer was when he defended British soldiers after the Boston Massacre in 1770. A group of soldiers had shot and killed some American colonists during a protest. Everyone was angry, and no one wanted to help the soldiers. But John said, "Even the guilty deserve a fair trial." He defended them because he believed in fairness and law. That was very brave of him. Around this time, John was also falling in love. Her name was Abigail Smith, a smart and kind woman with a big heart and a sharp mind. They got married in 1764, and they were deeply in love. Abigail wasn't just his wife. She was his best friend and his advisor. They wrote hundreds of letters to each other, filled with affection and deep thoughts about life and the future of their country. They had 6 children, and one of them, John Quincy Adams, would also grow up to become a president one day. The Adams family was very close. They read together, prayed together, and talked about the world. As the colonies started getting more upset with British rule, John became more involved in politics. He went to meetings, gave speeches, and wrote essays. He was chosen to go to the First Continental Congress in 1774, where leaders from all the colonies talked about how to deal with the British king. In 1776, something incredible happened. John was asked to help write the Declaration of Independence. He worked closely with Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, and others to say why America should be free. When the Declaration was signed on July 4th, John knew history was being made. He even said that people would celebrate this day forever, with parades, fireworks, and joy. And he was right. But freedom wasn't easy. The Revolutionary War was long and painful. John was sent to France and the Netherlands to ask for help. He crossed dangerous oceans, got sick, and missed his family terribly. But he worked hard and helped get money and support to keep the fight going. After the war, John stayed in Europe as a diplomat, helping form peace treaties and building friendships between countries. He was also the first U.S. ambassador to Great Britain. That was awkward, since he had fought against them, but John handled it with grace. When he finally came home, the new United States needed leaders. In 1789, George Washington became the first president, and John Adams became the first vice president. John didn't love the job. He called it the most insignificant office, but he served faithfully. In 1796, something historic happened. John Adams was elected the second president of the United States. It was a hard job. He had to deal with threats of war from France, arguments between political parties, and people who didn't always agree with him. But he stayed calm and made careful decisions. One of the biggest things he did was keep America out of war with France. Many people wanted to fight, but John knew that war would hurt the young country. He sent peaceful messages, stayed strong, and in the end, avoided a battle. Some people were mad at him, but later they realized he was wise. John also signed the Alien and Sedition Acts, which were very controversial. They made it harder for immigrants to become citizens and punished people for criticizing the government. These laws made many people upset and hurt John's popularity. Looking back, many believe it was one of his biggest mistakes. In 1800, John ran for re-election but lost to Thomas Jefferson, his old friend who had become a rival. It was a sad time for John. He felt hurt, and he quietly left Washington and returned to his farm in Quincy, Massachusetts. But something beautiful happened. Over the years, John and Jefferson started writing letters to each other again. They talked about their memories, their dreams, and their love for the country they helped build. Their friendship bloomed again in their old age. John Adams lived to be 90 years old, which was very rare back then. He spent his days reading, writing, and walking through his garden. He loved to eat simple foods. He liked fresh vegetables, fish, and cider. He played with his grandchildren and smiled often. His wife, Abigail, had passed away in 1818, and John missed her terribly. But he stayed strong. On July 4, 1826, the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, John Adams passed away. His last words were, "Thomas Jefferson survives," not knowing that Jefferson had died just a few hours earlier that very same day. It was almost like history had written a perfect ending to their story. The worst times in John Adams's life were when he lost people he loved, when he felt lonely in politics, and when he made decisions that others did not support. The best times were when he stood up for truth, helped create America, loved Abigail, and lived long enough to see his son become president. John loved reading, gardening, and discussing ideas. He didn't chase fame. He believed in doing what was right, even if it was hard. He was short, a little bit fiery, and always honest. He didn't win every argument, but he never ran away from one. Americans liked John Adams because he was real. He wasn't perfect, but he was always trying. He was brave in courtrooms, bold in Congress, and loyal to his family and country. He believed in freedom, fairness, and education. He didn't receive many awards in his lifetime, but today, schools, buildings, and books honor him. He is remembered as one of the founding fathers of the United States. His words, his letters, and his actions helped build the world we live in now. And so, the story of John Adams teaches us something very important, that you don't have to be the tallest or the most popular to make a big difference. You just have to be honest, kind, and strong in your heart. He lived a life full of courage, love, and service. He was a teacher, a lawyer, a writer, a husband, a father, a patriot, and a president. And in the quiet town of Quincy, where he now rests beside Abigail, the wind still whispers his story, of a man who gave his whole heart to the country he helped create. May we always remember John Adams not just as a president, but as a friend of liberty, a voice of reason, and a soul who believed in the power of words, love, and dreams. Mr. Thomas Jefferson. He was the third president of United States of America. Once upon a time, on a soft spring day in a quiet part of Virginia, a baby boy was born in a large wooden house surrounded by rolling hills, tall trees, and fresh air. It was April 13th, 1743, and the baby's name was Thomas Jefferson. He was born at a place called Shadwell, near what is now Charlottesville, Virginia. His father was Peter Jefferson, a tall, strong man who worked as a land surveyor and planter. He loved learning and wanted his children to have good educations. His mother was Jane Randolph Jefferson, a gentlewoman from a well-known family in Virginia. She read poems and played music and taught little Thomas to be curious about the world. Thomas was the third of 10 children. That's right, 10. The Jefferson house was always full of noise, laughter, and busy little feet. From the time he was small, Thomas loved to read. He would lie under a tree with a book and forget about everything else. His favorite books were about science, history, nature, and faraway lands. He once said, "I cannot live without books." Thomas started school when he was very young. He learned Latin, Greek, and French, as well as math and history. When he was just 16 years old, he went to the College of William and Mary in Williamsburg, Virginia. That was a big deal back then. It was one of the only colleges in America. College, Thomas studied very hard. He was shy and quiet, but always listening and learning. He was very curious, and he asked big questions about life, freedom, and government. He also learned how to dance, play the violin, and speak in public. He loved music so much that he would play his violin to relax after a long day of studying. After college, Thomas became a lawyer. He didn't like arguments, but he liked helping people and finding the truth. He worked hard, often writing out long notes and copying law books by hand. Thomas also designed things. He was like a real-life inventor. He designed his home, Monticello, which means little mountain in Italian. It sat on a hilltop and had long porches, tall windows, and secret passageways. He designed furniture, tools, and even gadgets to make daily life easier. As he worked as a lawyer, Thomas began thinking more and more about freedom. He didn't like how the British king treated the American colonies. He believed that all people should be free to live their lives, choose their leaders, and speak their minds. So he joined the Virginia House of Burgesses, which was like a local government. When America started getting ready to fight for independence, Thomas was asked to do something very important. In 1776, he went to Philadelphia as part of the Second Continental Congress. There, the leaders of the colonies chose him to write a very special document, the Declaration of Independence. Thomas was only 33 years old, but he wrote words that would live forever. "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal." His beautiful writing helped tell the world why America wanted to be free. On July 4th, 1776, the Declaration was adopted, and America was born. After that, Thomas served in many important jobs. He was governor of Virginia, and then he went to France as a diplomat. He learned French, visited castles and gardens, and studied how people lived in other countries. He sent back seeds, books, and ideas to America. He came home just in time to help create a new government for the young United States. He became the first Secretary of State under President George Washington. He worked with Alexander Hamilton, though the two didn't always agree. Hamilton wanted a strong central government, but Jefferson believed in giving more power to the people and the states. Later, Thomas became vice president under John Adams, even though they belonged to different political parties. That was tricky, and they often disagreed. But when the next election came in 1800, something amazing happened. Thomas Jefferson was elected the third president of the United States. He called his win the Revolution of 1800 because it showed that power could change hands peacefully in a free country. As president, he tried to keep things simple. He walked to his own inauguration instead of riding in a fancy carriage. He believed the president should be close to the people. One of his biggest achievements was the Louisiana Purchase in 1803. America bought a huge amount of land from France, doubling the size of the country. Then he sent Meriwether Lewis and William Clark to explore it. They traveled all the way to the Pacific Ocean, meeting native tribes and discovering plants and animals. It was a grand adventure that opened up the West. Thomas also tried to keep America out of war and protect trade, but that wasn't always easy. He passed a law called the Embargo Act, which stopped trade with other countries. It was meant to protect American ships, but it ended up hurting the economy, and many people were upset about it. After 2 terms as president, Thomas retired in 1809 and returned to Monticello. He was happy to be back home with his books, gardens, and family. He loved farming, reading, and building things. He even designed a new kind of plow and kept careful notes about his crops. He had a big family with his wife, Martha Wales Skelton Jefferson, whom he married in 1772. Martha was kind, intelligent, and musical just like Thomas. Sadly, she died in 1782, and Thomas was heartbroken. He never married again. They had 6 children, but only 2 survived to adulthood. At Monticello, Thomas read every day. He liked to eat fresh vegetables, especially peas, and enjoyed French foods like wine and cheese, which he discovered while in Europe. He also loved architecture, music, and science. He once said, "I am a great believer in luck, and I find the harder I work, the more I have of it." One of the best things Thomas ever did after being president was starting a university. In 1819, he founded the University of Virginia. He believed in education and wanted young people to learn freely and think for themselves. He even designed the buildings himself. Even though he had many great moments, Thomas also faced hard times. He was often in debt and worried about money. He owned many enslaved people, which today we know was wrong. He believed slavery was bad, but he did not free most of the people he enslaved during his lifetime. This is one part of his story that is very sad and complicated. Still, many people admired Thomas Jefferson for his mind, his words, and his love of freedom. He received many letters, honors, and visitors in his old age. People would come from far away just to talk with him. The best day of his old age came on July 4th, 1826, the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. On that very day, at the age of 83, Thomas Jefferson passed away peacefully at Monticello. Amazingly, his old friend and rival, John Adams, died on the same day just hours later. Thomas Jefferson left behind a powerful legacy. He helped shape a country with his words, his ideas, and his courage. He showed us that freedom, learning, and truth are worth fighting for. He didn't receive shiny trophies or medals, but he received something even greater: the love and respect of a nation. He is honored on Mount Rushmore, on nickels, and in schools across the land. Americans like him because he believed in people's rights, in free speech, in education, and in a country where everyone could have a voice. His writings still make us think and dream. And so, when we think of Thomas Jefferson, we remember a quiet boy who loved books, a young man who wrote bold words, a president who doubled a nation, and an old thinker who built a university. He was a farmer, a writer, a builder, a dreamer, and a leader. He was not perfect, no person is, but he always tried to grow and understand more. As we look back on his life, we see the story of America itself. Full of questions, full of hope, full of new ideas. May we carry forward the light that Thomas Jefferson helped to shine, and never stop learning, wondering, and believing in a better tomorrow. Mr. James Madison. He was the 4th President of United States of America. Once upon a time, in the quiet green hills of Virginia, there was a big plantation house called Montpelier. On a gentle spring day, March 16, 1751, a baby boy was born there. His name was James Madison, and he would grow up to help build a whole new country and even become its 4th president. But when he was born, nobody knew just how important this little baby would become. James was the oldest of 12 children, though sadly, not all of his brothers and sisters lived to grow up. His father, James Madison Sr., was a wealthy farmer and planter. He owned a lot of land and many enslaved workers. His mother, Nellie Conway Madison, was smart, gentle, and full of love for her children. She taught James to be polite, curious, and honest. James was a small, quiet boy. He was not strong and often got sick. He had trouble with his stomach and sometimes had to rest for days. But even though his body was weak, his mind was strong. He loved books, reading, and learning about everything in the world. He especially liked history, government, and languages. He started school with private tutors, right there on the plantation. When he was ready, he went to a special school where he studied Latin, Greek, math, and science. He was a great student and worked very hard. When he turned 18, James Madison went to the College of New Jersey, which we now call Princeton University. He studied so much and so fast that he finished college in just 2 years, which was very rare. He didn't just want to pass tests. He wanted to understand how people and governments worked. He asked big questions and he kept notebooks full of ideas. After college, James went home and thought about becoming a minister. But he didn't become one. Instead, he got interested in politics, how countries are run, and how people make rules. He wanted to help people live better lives with fair laws and freedom. James began his career in politics in 1776, the same year America declared independence from Britain. He joined the Virginia state legislature, where he met Thomas Jefferson, who became a lifelong friend. They both believed in liberty, learning, and government by the people. James was not a great speaker. His voice was soft, and he often got nervous in front of crowds. But he was a master writer and thinker. People listened when he wrote things down because his ideas were clear, deep, and wise. After America won the Revolutionary War, the country needed rules. The first set of rules, called the Articles of Confederation, didn't work very well. The states had too much power and didn't work together as a country. So, in 1787, James Madison helped organize a meeting in Philadelphia. It was called the Constitutional Convention. There, James took lots and lots of notes. He hardly ever missed a day. He listened carefully to every speaker. But more than that, he had a big plan called the Virginia Plan, which helped shape the new government. It talked about 3 branches: legislative, to make laws; executive, to carry out laws; and judicial, to interpret laws. This helped form the U.S. Constitution we still use today. Because he helped so much, people call him the father of the Constitution. But James wasn't done yet. Some people were worried that the new Constitution didn't protect people's freedoms. So James promised to add a Bill of Rights, a list of 10 important freedoms like freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and the right to a fair trial. He wrote most of it himself and helped get it passed. James served in the U.S. House of Representatives for many years. He worked hard, always thinking about how to balance freedom and fairness. In 1794, he married a lively and kind woman named Dolly Payne Todd. Dolly was a widow with a young son. James was quiet and serious, and Dolly was cheerful and social. They were opposites, but they loved each other very much. She made their home full of laughter and friends. People loved visiting the Madisons. James then became Secretary of State under President Thomas Jefferson. He helped manage foreign affairs and oversaw the Louisiana Purchase, which doubled the size of the country. When Jefferson finished his 2 terms, James Madison was elected as the next president in 1808. As the 4th president of the United States, James faced big problems. Britain was bothering American ships, stopping trade, and even taking American sailors and forcing them to fight in their navy. This made many Americans very angry. In 1812, the United States went to war with Britain again. It was called the War of 1812. It was a hard and scary time. In 1814, British soldiers even marched into Washington, D.C., and burned the White House. James had to flee the city, but Dolly Madison bravely stayed behind long enough to save important papers and a famous painting of George Washington. Even though the war had many troubles, America ended up feeling proud. The U.S. stood up to Britain and proved it could defend itself. The Star-Spangled Banner, the national anthem, was written during this war by Francis Scott Key. After the war, people saw Madison as a strong leader. He believed in a strong but limited government, in individual rights, and in the importance of learning. After his 2nd term, James retired in 1817 and went home to Montpelier. He spent his days reading, writing letters, talking to friends, and helping run his plantation. He was sad sometimes, especially because he still owned enslaved people, even though he had once spoken against slavery. He didn't free them, and that part of his story is painful to remember. Still, many people admired Madison for helping build a strong, free country. He became the rector of the University of Virginia, a school his friend Jefferson had started. He kept learning until the end of his life. He lived until June 28, 1836, when he passed away at the age of 85. He was the last surviving signer of the Constitution. James Madison had no children of his own, but he was like a father to the Constitution and helped raise a country. He loved books, his library had thousands of them, and he believed that knowledge and freedom went hand in hand. His favorite foods were simple. He liked ice cream, fried oysters, and apple pie. His hobby was reading, and he loved walking in the gardens of Montpelier. He didn't win any modern awards, but his biggest reward was knowing he helped shape America's ideas of freedom and fairness. Today, his face is on the $5,000 bill, though it's not used much anymore. Americans admire James Madison because he was quiet but mighty. He wasn't a soldier or a loudspeaker. He changed the world by thinking deeply, writing wisely, and staying true to what was right. His best moments were helping write the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and leading the country during war. His hardest moments were dealing with illness, war, and slavery. But through it all, he stayed thoughtful, brave, and loyal. And now, when we think of James Madison, we think of a small man with a big brain and an even bigger heart. He believed that the best government is one that listens to the people and protects their rights. So let us remember him as the man who gave us the words that still guide our land, who worked with friends to shape a dream, and who lived a quiet life full of powerful ideas. In the story of America, James Madison will always be the gentle voice of reason, whispering through the pages of our Constitution, reminding us that freedom begins with thought, and that one person with pen in hand and courage in heart can help change the world. Mr. James Monroe. He was the 5th President of United States of America. Once upon a time, in a quiet and peaceful place called Westmoreland County, Virginia, a baby boy was born on April 28, 1758. The baby's name was James Monroe. He didn't come from a fancy or rich family, but he was born with something very special inside of him: a strong heart, a brave spirit, and a love for his country. James's father was named Spence Monroe. He worked hard as a farmer and also made things out of wood. His mother, Elizabeth Jones Monroe, was gentle and kind and took care of their 5 children, including little James. They lived on a farm where they grew crops and took care of animals. It was a simple life, but it taught James how to be patient, strong, and helpful. From the time James was small, he liked to run through the woods, climb trees, and read whatever books he could find. He wasn't the loudest boy, but he watched everything carefully and thought deeply. His parents knew he was special, even if they couldn't always give him all the things he needed. When James was just 16 years old, something very sad happened. His father died. Not long after, his mother passed away too. That meant James and his siblings had to grow up quickly. Even though he was just a teenager, James was already learning how to face life's hardest moments with courage. James went to school at Campbelltown Academy, and later, he was lucky enough to study at the College of William and Mary, one of the oldest and most respected colleges in America. But he didn't stay there for long, because something very big was happening in the world. It was the American Revolution, a war between the American colonies and the British king. The colonies wanted to be free. They wanted to rule themselves and make their own laws. James felt a fire in his heart. He couldn't sit still while others were fighting for freedom. So he left college and joined the Continental Army to fight for his country. Thomas Jefferson, who became his mentor and friend. Jefferson saw that James had a good soul and a sharp mind. James soon started working as a lawyer in Virginia, helping people understand the law and settle disputes. In 1782, James entered politics. He was elected to the Virginia House of Delegates, and a year later, he joined the Continental Congress. He was still so young, but he was already helping shape the new nation. In 1786, James Monroe married a kind and graceful woman named Elizabeth Cortright from New York City. She was elegant, smart, and loved music and reading. Together, they had 3 children, though sadly, 2 died very young. Their daughter, Eliza Monroe, grew up and became very close to her father. James and Elizabeth were deeply in love, and they were always kind to one another. In politics, James believed in freedom, fairness, and peace. He became a U.S. Senator, then the governor of Virginia, and then served as a diplomat in France during the French Revolution. He worked hard to keep peace between the U.S. and France. While he was in France, he wore American clothes instead of fancy European ones to show that he stood for the common people. Later, James helped with the Louisiana Purchase, when the United States bought a huge amount of land from France. This made the country twice as big. It was one of the most important land deals in history. James served as both the Secretary of State and the Secretary of War under President James Madison. He helped defend the country during the War of 1812, when British soldiers attacked Washington, D.C., and burned the White House. In 1816, the people of America chose James Monroe to be their president, and in 1820 they re-elected him. He served 2 full terms, from 1817 to 1825. His time as president was known as the Era of Good Feelings because Americans felt hopeful, united, and proud. James Monroe was calm, thoughtful, and always tried to bring people together. He traveled across the country, something no other president had done before, just to meet citizens and listen to their hopes. One of the most important things he did as president was creating the Monroe Doctrine. This was a big message to Europe. Don't try to take over any more land in the Americas. This part of the world belongs to free nations. That idea helped protect countries in North and South America and showed the world that the U.S. was strong and serious. James also helped 5 new states join the country: Mississippi, Illinois, Alabama, Maine, and Missouri. He built roads and bridges, helped the economy grow, and encouraged learning and farming. But not everything was easy. The Panic of 1819 brought hard times for many people. Banks closed, and many lost their homes and jobs. Monroe worked hard to fix the economy and protect families. He also signed the Missouri Compromise, which tried to settle arguments between the North and South about slavery. It allowed Missouri to be a slave state and Maine to be a free state, keeping the balance for a while. Monroe didn't love slavery, but like many leaders at the time, he struggled with what to do about it. After his presidency, Monroe retired to a quiet life. Sadly, he lost his beloved wife Elizabeth in 1830. He missed her so much. He moved in with his daughter Maria and lived with her family in New York City. He didn't have a lot of money, but he had a heart full of memories. On July 4, 1831, exactly 55 years after the Declaration of Independence, and just like John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, James Monroe passed away. He was 73 years old. The people of America mourned the loss of a hero, a founder, and a kind leader. James Monroe loved reading, riding horses, and long walks in the countryside. He liked simple foods like cornbread, ham, and apples. He didn't care for fame or riches. He just wanted to serve and help. He never won big awards, but he earned something more valuable: the respect and love of the people. His name is remembered in towns, schools, and even in the country of Liberia, where its capital city, Monrovia, is named after him. Americans admired James Monroe because he was steady, honest, and full of quiet strength. He helped the country grow peacefully, kept it safe from foreign threats, and cared about every citizen, rich or poor. And so, the story of James Monroe reminds us that a true leader doesn't need to be loud or proud. Sometimes, the greatest strength is in being humble, kind, and always doing what is right, even when it's hard. His life began in a little farmhouse in Virginia, and his heart carried the dreams of a whole country. As you close your eyes and drift off to sleep, remember James Monroe, the soldier, the president, the peacemaker, the gentle hero of a young America. Mr. John Quincy Adams. He was the 6th President of United States of America. A long, long time ago, on July 11, 1767, in a quiet little town called Braintree in Massachusetts, a baby boy was born. His parents looked down at him with wonder in their eyes. They named him John Quincy Adams. His father was John Adams, a smart, serious man who would one day help America become free and would even become the second president of the United States. His mother was Abigail Adams, a kind, strong woman who loved books, writing, and taking care of her family. She taught John Quincy many lessons about being honest, working hard, and loving his country. When John Quincy was still very young, he saw big things happening in his world. America was fighting to become independent from Britain. His father was busy helping with meetings and writing important papers. John Quincy listened closely to everything. He didn't play outside much like other boys. Instead, he read books, lots and lots of books. When he was just 10 years old, something incredible happened. His father took him across the ocean to France, where he helped with work for America. John Quincy saw kings and castles, learned French, and even met powerful leaders. He wasn't just watching, he was helping, even as a boy. His father said he was like a little adult in a boy's body. John Quincy never stopped learning. He went to school in Europe, then came back home and went to Harvard College when he was only 18 years old. He studied law and became a lawyer. But John Quincy didn't stay a lawyer for long. He had something special inside, something like a fire. He wanted to help people. He wanted to help the new country grow and be strong. So he started working for the government. He became a diplomat, which means he traveled to other countries to speak for America. He was very good at this. People listened to him because he was smart, honest, and knew a lot about other countries. When he was still in his 20s, he helped make peace between nations. Presidents noticed how wise he was. President George Washington said John Quincy Adams was one of the most talented young men in the whole country. John Quincy Adams became a senator, and then he worked for different presidents. He was even Secretary of State for President James Monroe. While he was Secretary of State, he helped write something very important called the Monroe Doctrine. It said that Europe should stay out of the Americas. This helped protect the new countries in the Western Hemisphere. Then something amazing happened. In 1825, John Quincy Adams became the 6th president of the United States. Being president wasn't easy. He had big dreams. He wanted to build roads, schools, and even an observatory to study the stars. He believed in helping all Americans, not just the rich or powerful. He also wanted the country to become smarter, so he encouraged learning and science. But not everyone liked his ideas. Some people thought the government shouldn't spend money on things like roads and schools. Some didn't like that he had been chosen president in a very close vote by the House of Representatives, not just by the people. Because of this, many in Congress didn't help him, and it was hard to get things done. Even though he tried his best, after just one term, 4 years, he lost the next election to Andrew Jackson. But John Quincy Adams didn't go home and rest. No, not at all. Instead, he became something even more surprising, a congressman in the House of Representatives. Imagine that, a former president working again in a smaller job because he still wanted to help. And help he did. In Congress, he became a hero for freedom. He spoke out against slavery, even when people tried to stop him. He believed every person deserved to be free, and he worked hard to fight for that belief. One of the most famous moments of his life happened when he helped in the case of the Amistad, a ship where enslaved people had fought for their freedom. John Quincy Adams stood before the Supreme Court and spoke bravely for hours to defend them, and he won. The people on the ship were set free. This made many Americans admire him deeply. They saw him as a man who never gave up, who always did what was right, even when it was hard. John Quincy Adams had both sad times and happy times in his life. One of the saddest times was when 2 of his sons died. He loved them so much, and it broke his heart. But he kept going, always trying to serve his country. The happiest times were when he was reading, writing, helping people, and spending time with his wife, Louisa Catherine Johnson, whom he had married in 1797. Louisa was born in London and became the First Lady born outside the United States. They had 4 children together. John Quincy Adams didn't like fancy clothes or big parties. He preferred books, long walks, swimming in the Potomac River, and writing in his diary, which he did almost every day of his life. He even liked waking up before the sun and taking chilly swims, even when there was ice. As for food, he liked fruit, especially apples, and he enjoyed simple meals. He wasn't a man of rich tastes, but of thoughtful habits. Did he win awards? Well, in his time, they didn't give awards like we do today. But he earned the respect of many leaders, and history remembers him as one of the most honest and hardworking public servants ever. People like John Quincy Adams, because he never gave up, he always spoke the truth, and he used his mind and his heart to help others. He showed that even when things are hard, you can still do what is right. He spent 17 years serving in Congress after being president. And on February 21, 1848, while still working in the Capitol building, John Quincy Adams collapsed from a stroke. He was taken to a nearby room, and there, surrounded by people who loved and respected him, he passed away 2 days later on February 23, 1848, at the age of 80. He died doing what he loved, serving his country. Now, when children visit Washington, D.C., or study the early presidents, they learn about a man who had courage, wisdom, and kindness. They learn about John Quincy Adams, who didn't just live for himself, but for others. His life was like a book filled with adventures, challenges, and brave choices. He was a boy who traveled the seas, a man who spoke for freedom, and a leader who followed his heart, even when it wasn't easy. And so, when we think about America and all the people who helped shape it, we remember John Quincy Adams, not just as a president, but as a man who kept going, kept learning, and kept loving his country every single day. Mr. Andrew Jackson. He was the 7th President of United States of America. Once upon a time, a baby boy was born in a small, simple log cabin in a place called the Waxhaws, on the border of North and South Carolina. This happened on March 15, 1767. His name was Andrew Jackson. Andrew's father, also named Andrew Jackson, was a poor farmer who had moved from Ireland to America to find a better life. Sadly, Andrew's father died just 3 weeks before he was born. That meant little Andrew never got to meet his dad. His mother, Elizabeth Hutchinson Jackson, worked very hard to take care of Andrew and his 2 older brothers. She loved her boys deeply and tried her best to raise them to be strong and kind. Even though life was hard, Andrew didn't go to a fancy school. He went to small schools in the countryside and learned to read and write. He liked stories and history, but he didn't enjoy sitting still in class. He was wild, full of energy, and always ready for adventure. Some people said he had a fiery temper, but he also had a strong sense of right and wrong. When Andrew was just 13 years old, something big happened in America. It was the Revolutionary War, where the American colonies were fighting to become free from British rule. Even though he was just a boy, Andrew joined the fight as a messenger. He helped deliver secret messages between American soldiers. One day, Andrew was captured by British soldiers. A British officer ordered him to clean his boots, but Andrew bravely refused. The officer struck him with a sword, leaving scars on Andrew's head and hand. That moment showed just how stubborn and brave Andrew was, even as a kid. Soon after, terrible things happened. Andrew's older brothers died, one from heat and exhaustion after being taken prisoner, and the other from wounds in battle. His mother died, too, while helping American soldiers who were sick. Andrew was left all alone, an orphan at just 14 years old. Even though he was sad and had no family, Andrew didn't give up. He worked as a saddle maker and a teacher for a little while, but he wanted to do something more. So he studied law and became a lawyer in Tennessee. He was good at talking and arguing, and he was brave in court. As he worked hard and helped people, Andrew became popular in Tennessee. He served as a prosecutor, then a judge, and even helped write the laws for the new state. He got married to a kind woman named Rachel Donaldson. Rachel was warm and gentle, and Andrew loved her deeply. But not everything was smooth. There was a big mix-up about Rachel's first marriage, and many people criticized Andrew and Rachel, especially when he ran for president later. This made Andrew very angry because he believed no one should insult someone he loved. Andrew also joined the military again. He became a general, and he was strong and fearless. One of his most famous battles was the Battle of New Orleans during the War of 1812. British soldiers came to invade, but Andrew's army surprised everyone. Even though they were outnumbered, Andrew led his men to a huge victory. He became a national hero. People called him Old Hickory because he was as tough as a hickory tree. After that, Andrew became very famous. He served as a senator, and then people wanted him to run for president. He tried in 1824, but even though he got the most votes, he didn't win. That made him and his supporters very upset. They believed the election was stolen, but Andrew didn't quit. He ran again in 1828, and this time he won. Andrew Jackson became the 7th president of the United States. He was the first president who came from a poor background. Before him, most presidents were rich and came from fancy families. But Andrew was different. He stood for the common people, the farmers, the workers, the everyday folks. That's why many people loved him. As president, Andrew changed how things worked. He believed that regular people should have a say in government. He gave more power to voters and helped create the Democratic Party. He believed in a strong union and that America should stay together as one country. But some of the things Andrew did were very hard for Native Americans. One of the saddest parts of his presidency was the Indian Removal Act. He signed a law that forced many Native American tribes to leave their homes and move west. Thousands of people walked a long, painful journey that became known as the Trail of Tears. Many became sick and died along the way. This is a part of Andrew's life that many people feel very sad about. He also didn't like the big national bank. He thought it gave too much power to the rich and wasn't fair to regular people. So he shut it down, which made some people angry but others very happy. Even though he was tough and sometimes made hard choices, Andrew always believed he was doing what was best for America. After 2 terms as president, Andrew retired and went back to his home in Tennessee, called the Hermitage. He spent his time farming, reading letters from people all over the country, and missing his beloved wife Rachel, who had died just before he became president. He never stopped loving her. Andrew Jackson loved horses and riding. He liked to eat simple food, cornbread, ham, and coffee were his favorites. He liked dueling, which is when 2 men would fight with pistols over an insult or honor. He was even shot once in a duel and carried the bullet in his body for the rest of his life. He had a lot of pets, including a parrot named Polk, who was known for shouting naughty words. At his funeral, the parrot had to be taken away because it wouldn't stop squawking. Andrew Jackson died on June 8, 1845, at the age of 78. Even though he was sick and in pain, he stayed strong until the end. People remember Andrew in many different ways. Some admire his courage, strength, and his belief in democracy. Others are upset by the choices he made that hurt Native Americans. But no one can deny that he changed America in big ways. He didn't win any fancy awards, but Americans put his face on the $20 bill to honor his impact. Why do Americans remember Andrew Jackson? Because he was the first president who truly came from the people. He believed in fighting for what you believe in, being tough in hard times, and never giving up, even when life is unfair. Andrew Jackson's life was full of loss and love, war and peace, sorrow and success. He was not a perfect man, but he was real, and he lived with fierce passion. Mr. Martin Van Buren. He was the 8th President of United States of America. Once upon a time, in a small village called Kinderhook in New York, a baby boy was born on December 5, 1782. His name was Martin Van Buren. His father's name was Abraham Van Buren, and his mother's name was Maria Hose Van Buren. They were a Dutch family and they spoke Dutch at home. Martin was actually the first U.S. president to be born after the United States became its own country. And guess what? He was also the first president who was not born a British subject. Martin's father owned a small tavern, kind of like a little restaurant and inn, and many travelers stopped by. Martin would help out there, and while he was working, he would listen to the people talk about all kinds of things, including politics. This is probably where his interest in government first began. Martin didn't go to a big fancy school. He went to a local village school and later studied at an academy. He didn't go to college either. Instead, he studied law by working in a lawyer's office, which was something people did back then. He studied hard and became a lawyer at the young age of 20. As a young man, Martin had red hair and stood quite short, only about 5 feet 6 inches tall, but he had a big smile and a very clever mind. People liked to talk to him, and he had a soft voice that made others feel calm. He was good at listening and even better at thinking quickly. that made him an excellent lawyer and later a very smart politician. Martin's career in politics started small. He became involved in local government and soon moved on to state politics. He helped start a powerful political group in New York called the Albany Regency. This group helped pick candidates and make decisions about elections. Martin was very good at building relationships and getting people to work together. In 1812, Martin Van Buren was elected to the New York State Senate. He was still young, but people were already noticing his talents. Later, he became the state's attorney general and then moved on to national politics. In 1821, he became a United States senator. People called him the Little Magician because of how cleverly he could manage political situations. He wasn't a magician, of course, but he could make things happen behind the scenes just like magic. He worked closely with Andrew Jackson, a strong and popular military hero who would become president. Martin supported Jackson and helped him win the presidency. In return, President Jackson made Martin the Secretary of State. That's a very important job that involves helping the president deal with other countries. After serving as Secretary of State, Martin became the vice president under Jackson during Jackson's second term. And when Jackson finished being president, Martin Van Buren ran for president himself. With Jackson's support and many loyal followers, Martin won the election in 1836 and became the 8th president of the United States. As president, Martin Van Buren faced many challenges. One of the biggest was something called the Panic of 1837. It was a time when banks closed, businesses failed, and many people lost their jobs. It was not Martin's fault, but he was the president, so many people blamed him anyway. He tried to fix things, but it was very hard. He created an independent treasury system, which meant that the government would keep its money in its own vaults, not in private banks. That idea helped keep the government's money safer. Martin also worked to continue Andrew Jackson's policies, especially when it came to avoiding war and keeping the government smaller. But not everyone agreed with his choices, and some people thought he wasn't doing enough to help during the hard economic times. Even though his presidency was filled with troubles, Martin stayed calm and thoughtful. He believed in fairness and careful decision-making. He didn't talk loudly or get angry. He liked to think things through and find peaceful solutions. After one term as president, Martin lost the next election. But he didn't give up on public service. In 1848, he ran again as a member of a new political party called the Free Soil Party. This group didn't want slavery to spread into new areas of the country. Martin lost that election too, but he showed great courage by standing up for what he believed in. Outside of politics, Martin Van Buren had a personal life full of quiet joys and some sadness. He married a woman named Hannah Hose, who was also from Kinderhook and spoke Dutch like him. They were cousins, which wasn't unusual back then, and they loved each other very much. Sadly, Hannah died in 1819 before Martin became president. He never married again. He missed her deeply for the rest of his life. Martin had 4 sons, and he loved being a father. After he left politics, he spent time at his beautiful home in Kinderhook, called Lindenwold. He enjoyed reading books, writing letters, walking through his gardens, and spending time with his family. Martin liked simple food. He enjoyed bread, vegetables, and meat, things that were common and easy to get in his time. He didn't care for big feasts or fancy meals. He loved peaceful days, gentle conversations, and the fresh air of the countryside. Some of the worst times in his life included the death of his wife, the stress of the economic crisis during his presidency, and the loss of his later election. But Martin Van Buren never became bitter. He stayed kind, smart, and hopeful. The best times in his life were when he was surrounded by friends and family, when he was serving the country, and when he was writing about the things he had seen and learned. He kept a journal and wrote about history, politics, and his travels. Although he didn't win awards like medals or trophies, Martin Van Buren received great respect. People knew him as a wise, polite, and thoughtful leader. Historians say he helped shape the way modern political parties work. He was a bridge between the old days of the Founding Fathers and the new America that was growing and changing. So why do Americans remember and admire Martin Van Buren? It's because he came from a small town, worked very hard, stayed honest, and never gave up. He believed in the power of democracy and tried his best to help others, even when it was difficult. He stood for fairness, and he wanted a better future for his country. Martin Van Buren passed away on July 24, 1862, at the age of 79, in his beloved hometown of Kinderhook. He left behind a legacy of wisdom, peace, and quiet strength. Mr. William Henry Harrison. He was the 9th President of United States of America. Once upon a time, long ago, on February 9, 1773, a baby boy was born in a big house called Berkeley Plantation, which is in the state of Virginia. His name was William Henry Harrison. He came from a very important family. His father was Benjamin Harrison V., a man who helped America become free by signing a very special paper called the Declaration of Independence. His mother was Elizabeth Bassett Harrison, who was kind and caring. William was the youngest of many brothers and sisters, and his family was very proud of their history. As a little boy, William grew up on that big plantation, surrounded by trees, animals, and the sounds of nature. He was a curious child who loved to learn. When it was time for school, he went to a school near his home where he studied reading, writing, and arithmetic. Later, he went to college at Hampton-Sydney College in Virginia, where he learned about history and classical languages like Latin and Greek. He was a good student, but his studies were sometimes interrupted by important family events. William then started studying medicine at the University of Pennsylvania because he thought about becoming a doctor. But when his father died, William changed his mind. Instead of being a doctor, he wanted to serve his country. So he joined the army. William was brave and strong. He became a soldier and fought in many battles, especially against Native American tribes in the Ohio Valley. These battles were part of what was called the Northwest Indian War. One famous battle he fought in was the Battle of Fallen Timbers in 1794. William's leadership and courage helped the American soldiers win, and he became known as a hero. Because William was so brave and smart, the government asked him to be the leader of the Indiana Territory. This was a big area in the western part of the country. As the governor, William made treaties with Native American tribes and helped settle the land so more people could live there safely. In 1795, William married a kind woman named Anna Tuthill Sims. Anna was the daughter of a judge, and she and William loved each other very much. They had 10 children together, and their family was full of laughter and love. William also started to get involved in politics. He wanted to help his country not just by fighting, but by making good decisions for all the people. He served in the United States House of Representatives and later in the Senate. People admired him because he was honest and worked hard for the good of the country. William became even more famous after a big battle called the Battle of Tippecanoe in 1811. He led American soldiers against a group of Native Americans led by a man named Tecumseh, who wanted to stop settlers from moving west. William's victory made him a national hero. People started calling him Old Tippecanoe because of this brave win. Years later, in 1840, William Henry Harrison ran for President of the United States. His campaign was very special because people wanted a leader who seemed like a regular person. They said he was a man who lived simply in a log cabin and drank hard cider, even though he was really from a wealthy family. His campaign slogan was Tippecanoe and Tyler too, and it became very popular. William won the election and became the 9th President of the United States. On March 4, 1841, William gave the longest inaugural speech in history. It was a very cold and rainy day, but he didn't wear a hat or coat. Unfortunately, this caused him to get very sick with pneumonia. Just 32 days after becoming president, William Henry Harrison died. This was the shortest presidency in American history. Even though William was president for only a short time, people remember him for his bravery, leadership, and the important role he played in America's early years. His story shows us that courage and dedication are what make a true leader. William enjoyed simple things in life. He liked spending time outdoors, riding horses, and being with his family. He ate traditional foods of the time, like cornbread, vegetables, and fresh meats. He loved his wife Anna and took care of his children, teaching them the values of honesty and hard work. William Henry Harrison didn't receive many awards like we think of today, but the respect and admiration from his countrymen were his greatest honors. Americans like him because he stood for courage, honor, and service to his country. Even though his time as president was short, William's life was full of adventure, love, and service. He reminds us that what we do with our lives matters most, no matter how long we have. And so, the story of William Henry Harrison ends, but his spirit lives on. May we all remember to be brave, kind, and true just like him. Every day is a chance to serve and to make the world a better place. Mr. John Tyler. He was the 10th President of United States of America. A long time ago, on a quiet spring day, March 29, 1790, a baby boy was born in a big house on a farm called Greenway, near Charles City in Virginia. This baby's name was John Tyler. His family was well known and respected because his father, John Tyler Sr., was a judge who worked to make sure people were treated fairly in their community. His mother, Mary Armistead Tyler, was a kind woman who took care of John and his many brothers and sisters. John grew up on the farm, surrounded by fields, trees, and the sounds of animals. From an early age, he learned about the land and the importance of working hard. His parents believed education was important, so John went to local schools to learn to read, write, and understand numbers. He was a bright boy who loved to learn new things. When he was older, John went to the College of William and Mary, which was one of the best schools in America at that time. He studied law because he wanted to help people understand rules and fairness. He dreamed of helping his state and country by knowing the laws very well. After finishing school, John became a lawyer. This meant he helped people by giving advice and speaking for them in court. People trusted John because he was honest and fair. He wasn't just interested in his own success. He wanted to make things better for everyone. John soon started to help his community in bigger ways. He was elected to the Virginia House of Delegates. This was a group of people who made decisions for the state. John worked hard and showed he could be a good leader. He believed strongly in the Constitution, the rules that helped keep the country running smoothly. John's political career grew, and he became a member of the U.S. House of Representatives. Here, he helped decide important things for the whole country. Later, he was chosen to be governor of Virginia, where he worked to help the people of his state with education, roads, and fairness in laws. John was known for being calm and steady, but also very determined when it came to standing up for what he believed was right. He didn't like to change his mind just because others disagreed. He wanted what was best for the country, even if it meant facing difficult challenges. In 1840, something very special happened. John Tyler was chosen to be the Vice President of the United States, serving under President William Henry Harrison. They both went to Washington, D.C., ready to lead the country. But just 1 month after they began, President Harrison became very sick and died. Because of this, John Tyler became the new president. This was a surprise to many people because no one had become president this way before. Some people even called him His Accidency, thinking it was an accident he was president. But John Tyler was strong and steady. He showed everyone that the vice president could take the president's place and lead the country. As president, John Tyler worked to keep the country united. One of his biggest projects was helping Texas join the United States. This was a very important moment because it made America bigger and stronger. He also worked on improving the economy and supporting the Navy, making sure the country was safe and growing. But being president wasn't easy. Many people disagreed with John, and he faced tough times. Some members of his own party didn't like his ideas, and they even stopped working with him. It was a lonely time, but John never gave up. He believed in doing what was right, even if it was hard. On the other hand, John had some happy times too. He loved spending time with his family. His first wife, Letitia Christian Tyler, was a wonderful partner. She supported him through the ups and downs of his political life. Unfortunately, she became very sick and passed away while John was still president, which was a very sad time for him. Later, John married Julia Gardner Tyler, a lively and cheerful woman who brought joy back into his life. Together, they had several children. John was a caring father who loved his family very much. He enjoyed simple pleasures like horseback riding, reading books about history and government, and spending quiet moments on his farm. John liked to eat the food common in Virginia: fresh vegetables from the garden, meats like chicken and beef, cornbread, and sometimes sweets baked by his family. He was not a picky eater but enjoyed good, home-cooked meals. Though John Tyler didn't receive many formal awards like medals or prizes, many Americans respected him for his honesty, courage, and dedication to the country. People appreciated that he kept the government steady during a tricky time and that he worked hard to make America grow. Today, Americans remember John Tyler as a president who stepped up when the country needed him the most. His life shows us that even when things happen unexpectedly, we can face challenges with courage, keep doing our best, and take care of those we love. John Tyler's story teaches us about strength, duty, and kindness. It reminds us that leaders come in many ways, and sometimes being steady and true to your values is the greatest gift you can give. And so, as we close this story, remember, every life is a journey with happy days and hard days. What matters most is how we live with honesty, care for others, and keep hope in our hearts. May you always be brave and gentle like John Tyler, ready to help and stand tall no matter what life brings your way. Mr. James K. Polk. He was the 11th President of United States of America. Once upon a time, in a quiet town called Pineville, in North Carolina, a baby boy was born on November 2nd, 1795. His name was James Knox Polk. His parents were Samuel Polk and Jane Knox Polk. Samuel was a farmer who loved working the land and taking care of his family, while Jane was a kind and caring mother who taught James the values of hard work and honesty. James grew up on a farm, surrounded by the sounds of nature: chirping birds, rustling leaves, and the soft mooing of cows. From a young age, he was curious and loved to learn new things. His parents wanted him to have a good education, so he went to school nearby, where he learned to read, write, and solve math problems. James was a bright student, always eager to ask questions and understand the world around him. When he grew older, James went to the University of North Carolina. There, he studied very hard and learned about many subjects, but he especially liked history and law. He wanted to help people and make the country a better place, so he decided to become a lawyer after finishing school. James worked as a lawyer for a while, but he wanted to do more. He wanted to help his community and his country by being involved in making important decisions. So he decided to enter politics. He was elected to the Tennessee State Legislature, where he worked to help the people of his state. James was good at speaking and explaining his ideas clearly, which helped him earn the trust of many people. Later, James was chosen to serve in the U.S. House of Representatives, where leaders from all over the country came to make decisions. He worked hard there and became well known for his strong beliefs and determination. People called him a dark horse because not many expected him to become president one day, but he surprised everyone with his smart ideas and hard work. In 1844, James Polk became the 11th President of the United States. When he became president, he had many big plans. One of the most important things he wanted to do was to make the country bigger and stronger. He believed that America should stretch all the way to the Pacific Ocean, so he worked to buy new lands and settle disputes about where the country's borders should be. During his time as president, James Polk was very busy. He helped the country grow by adding a huge piece of land called the Oregon Territory. He also led the country through the Mexican-American War, which resulted in the United States gaining even more land in the Southwest, including California and New Mexico. These actions helped make America a bigger and more powerful country. People admired James Polk for his clear goals and his ability to get things done. Even though he worked hard and faced many challenges, he stayed focused on what he believed was best for the country. Some people didn't always agree with him, but many respected his determination and leadership. James Polk's time as president wasn't always easy. The Mexican-American War was a hard and sad time because many soldiers were hurt or lost their lives. Also, managing a growing country was a big challenge, and not everyone was happy with the changes. But James kept working to make the country stronger and better. After serving one term, James Polk decided not to run for president again. He believed that a president should serve only a short time and then let someone else lead. After leaving the White House, he went back to Tennessee. Sadly, he became very sick and died just a few months later in June 1849, at the age of 53. James Polk married Sarah Childress, who was a smart and supportive wife. She helped him with his work and cared deeply for their family. James loved spending time with Sarah and enjoyed simple things like reading and walking outdoors. He liked good, home-cooked meals, often enjoying traditional Southern foods like cornbread, vegetables, and fresh fruit. Though James Polk didn't receive many formal awards, he is remembered by Americans as a president who achieved a lot in a short time. People like him because he worked hard, stayed true to his promises, and helped make the country bigger and stronger. James Polk's life teaches us that with focus, hard work, and belief in our goals, we can accomplish great things. He showed that leadership means making tough decisions and always thinking about the future. Mr. Zachary Taylor. He was the 12th President of United States of America. Once upon a time, on November 24, 1784, a baby named Zachary Taylor was born. He was born in Orange County, Virginia, which was a quiet, peaceful place with lots of farms and trees. Zachary's parents were Richard Taylor and Sarah Dabney Strother Taylor. His family was a strong and proud family, and his father was both a planter, someone who grew crops on a large farm, and a soldier. From the very beginning, Zachary's life was surrounded by stories of bravery and hard work. Zachary grew up in a big family, with several brothers and sisters. As a boy, he spent much of his time outdoors, exploring the woods, playing with animals, and learning to ride horses. Life on the farm taught him many important lessons about responsibility, patience, and strength. Zachary didn't go to college, but he learned a lot by watching others and by doing things himself. When Zachary was a young man, he decided he wanted to be a soldier. He felt brave and wanted to serve his country. So, at the age of 18, he joined the army. This was the start of a very important adventure. He worked hard to become a good soldier, learning how to lead other soldiers and how to be strong during battles. Zachary's early military career was not easy. He was sent to fight in many dangerous places, including battles against Native American tribes and during the War of 1812, which was a fight between the United States and Great Britain. Zachary showed great courage and leadership. He was not afraid to face danger and often led his soldiers from the front, showing them the way with his own example. As the years went on, Zachary Taylor became more and more famous. People called him Old Rough and Ready because he was tough, wore simple clothes, and was always ready to fight for his country. He didn't care about being fancy. He cared about being honest and brave. His victories in the army made him a hero to many Americans. One of the most important times in Zachary's military career was during the Mexican-American War in the 1840s. This war was fought because the United States wanted to expand and include new lands. Zachary led American soldiers in several big battles, like the Battle of Buena Vista, where his smaller army defeated a much larger enemy. His success made him very popular across the country. Because of his popularity, many people thought Zachary Taylor would make a good president. In 1848, the people of the United States voted for him, and he became the 12th president of the country. When he became president, Zachary was already 64 years old and had spent most of his life as a soldier. As president, Zachary wanted to help keep the country together. At that time, there were big arguments about whether new states should allow slavery or not. Zachary tried to be fair and wanted people to stop fighting. He hoped that everyone could find a way to live peacefully. He didn't make many big changes because his time as president was very short, only about 16 months. Sadly, Zachary Taylor got sick after spending too much time in the hot sun and rain. His illness grew worse quickly, and he died on July 9, 1850, only a short time after becoming president. His death was very sad for many Americans because he was seen as a strong and honest leader who cared deeply about his country. People remember Zachary Taylor for being a simple, brave man. He was not a politician who gave long speeches or wore fancy clothes. Instead, he was a soldier's soldier, a person who led by example and cared about doing what was right. Americans liked him because he was honest, down-to-earth, and a true hero. In his personal life, Zachary married Margaret Smith in 1810. They had 6 children together. He loved his family and took great joy in spending time with them whenever he could. Zachary also loved the outdoors. He enjoyed riding horses, hunting, and walking in nature. When it came to food, he liked simple, home-cooked meals like cornbread, fresh vegetables, and roasted meats, foods that reminded him of home and family. Zachary Taylor didn't receive many awards like medals or fancy honors from other countries, but his greatest reward was the love and respect of the American people. He earned a place in history as a brave soldier who became a president and tried to guide his country through difficult times. Even though Zachary's life was filled with battles and challenges, he showed that courage, honesty, and kindness matter the most. His story teaches us that being true to yourself and standing strong during hard times makes a person truly great. Mr. Millard Fillmore. He was the 13th President of United States of America. Once upon a time, on January 7, 1800, a baby boy named Millard Fillmore was born in a small, simple log cabin in a place called Summerhill, New York. His parents were Nathaniel Fillmore and Phoebe Millard Fillmore. They were hardworking farmers who lived a quiet life. Millard grew up surrounded by nature, fields, forests, and fresh air, and he learned early on how important it was to work hard and be honest. Millard's family was not rich, and there wasn't a school nearby, so when Millard was little, he didn't go to school every day like kids do now. But he loved to learn and was very curious. He read whatever books he could find. When he was about 12 years old, he went to a small school far away and stayed with a family who helped him learn. He worked very hard to understand reading, writing, and numbers because he wanted to do something important one day. After school, Millard decided he wanted to be a lawyer, a person who helps others by understanding the law and solving problems. Since he didn't go to college, he learned law by studying books and working with a local lawyer. This was called reading law, and it was how many people became lawyers back then. Millard was patient and smart, and soon he became a good lawyer. Millard started his work in law, but he also wanted to help people in bigger ways. So he began to get involved in politics, the work of making rules and laws to help the country. At first, he was a member of the Whig Party, which was one of the big groups of people who wanted to make America a better place. He worked hard to understand what the people needed and to make fair decisions. Because of his good work, Millard Fillmore was chosen to be a member of the U.S. House of Representatives, which is where people help make the laws for the whole country. He worked there for several years, learning a lot about the government and how things work in Washington, D.C. Later, he became the Vice President of the United States, which is like being the helper to the president. In 1850, something important happened. The president at that time, Zachary Taylor, suddenly got very sick and passed away. This was very sad for everyone. Because Millard was the vice president, he became the new president. This was a big responsibility and a surprise for Millard, but he was ready to do his best. As president, Millard Fillmore wanted to keep the country together. At that time, the country was divided about whether slavery should be allowed in new states. This was a very hard problem because many people had different opinions and feelings. Millard helped pass a law called the Compromise of 1850, which was meant to calm things down and stop people from fighting. This law included some very difficult parts, but it helped keep peace for a little while. One of the best things Millard did was helping to start the first National Library in the White House. He believed that everyone, including the president, should have books and knowledge to help make wise decisions. He also supported the building of better roads and canals to help people travel and send goods more easily. People thought many things about Millard Fillmore. Some said he was honest and hardworking, always trying to do what was right. Others didn't agree with all his decisions, especially about slavery, and that made his time as president very challenging. Still, many people respected him for being calm and steady during difficult times. The worst times in Millard's life included dealing with the fights about slavery and the way the country was heading towards more conflict. It was hard for him to keep everyone happy, and many people criticized him. But the best times were when he could help people learn and when he was with his family, sharing quiet moments of love and laughter. Millard married a kind and smart woman named Abigail Powers in 1826. She was very important to him and helped him with his work. Together, they had 2 children and lived a simple but happy life. Millard loved to read and learn new things. He enjoyed spending time outdoors, walking, and sometimes even gardening. For food, he liked simple meals like vegetables from the garden, fresh bread, and hearty stews. Millard Fillmore didn't receive many special awards, but his greatest honor was serving as the President of the United States and trying to keep the country peaceful during a very hard time. He showed that even a person from a small cabin can grow up to do great things if they work hard and stay honest. Americans like Millard Fillmore because he reminds us that being steady, calm, and caring is very important, especially when times are tough. He showed that sometimes leaders must make hard choices, but what matters most is trying to help all people live together in peace. As you think about Millard Fillmore's story, remember that greatness doesn't come only from fame or riches. It comes from kindness, patience, and a heart that wants to do good. May his life inspire you to be brave in your own way and to always keep learning and caring for others. Thank you for listening to all these people's stories. In this video, I only tell stories from the first President of America, George Washington, to the 13th President, Millard Fillmore. There are still all the remaining presidential stories left, which will come in another next part. Those who have done a lot for the country. That video will also be very beautiful and relaxing, and you will learn a lot. If you like hearing stories, please like this video. It really helps me understand that you want more stories like that. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any other thrilling adventure. Thanks so much for watching, and remember, every little step you take to learn something new makes the world a brighter place. See you next time.